live stream Tuesday here at just a couple minutes before 5:30. I always like to get it started just a little bit early if I can. And so thank you guys so much for joining me once again for another live stream. There's a couple things that I just want to go over here first before we get into the questions that I'm sure many of you have, and I'll do my best to answer them. No guarantees, but I'm going to do my best to answer your questions regardless. The one thing I want to point out is just to make the process a little bit more efficient. The last couple live streams that we've had, it's been actually kind of hard for me to keep up with the questions. I don't mind that everybody, I enjoy the fact that everybody's feeling free to comment back and forth with each other, but it's hard for me to just pick out the questions. If there's a lot of commentary is great, but just to make it a little bit easier, if you can, just kind of remember to do the we the govern. It'll be a little bit easier for me just to spot the questions as we go into it. Just a little bit easier for me to spot them as we go along. Just a couple of updates here. I know I've tried to, sometimes I forget to do this at these shows, but there's a couple of events coming up just in the next week or so. If you, that I'll be at, and it'll be worth I've been trying to keep up with some of my frequent viewers who want to see me in person. I will be at the June 1st Skagit County Republicans Lincoln Day Dinner. It's going to be it's on their website. You can see a bunch of information about it, and I'll be the MC at that event actually. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be up there on stage a lot, but I know I'm helping, I think, with some of their auction items and filling in a little bit during the program. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of candidates running for office. And so I won't be doing like a formal presentation there so much, but it'll be mostly just to facilitate the opportunity to see a lot of the candidates, the Republican candidates that are running for office around the state. So you'll get chances to be there. I think I'm going to do a table there as well, where when I'm not up on stage or something, I'll probably be by the table helping answer any questions. And as always, I'll probably set out like a donation bin there as well, or something along those lines. But that's just coming up Saturday. So if you do happen to be in Skagit County, last I heard I think they had about 400 some odd people signed up. I don't know. I'm assuming you can still sign up and go to that event. They do it in an airplane hangar at the airport there, so there's usually plenty of room if you do come, and the parking's pretty easy. That's one of the better venues I found out there for some of the Lincoln Day dinners around the state, just because they have plenty of space and they have lots of room to park, which can sometimes be tricky in some of these locations. Another quick update is next week, instead of doing a live stream and filming next week on Monday, or on Tuesday, I should say, I'm going to probably do it on Monday. So I believe my live stream next week will be on Monday and not Tuesday. So the third thing I wanted to mention, just real quick, because we are in the middle of, as I mentioned in one of my last videos here, signature gatherings going on right now for Initiative I-2066. Now, sometimes, since I travel around the state all the time, I'm driving around, when people have full signature sheets like this, I'll come out and grab them and bring them up and drop them off at some of the official Let's Go Washington folk site. But I mean, this is just an example of some of the stuff that I picked up today just from various activists that I met. There's probably about 400 or 360 signatures, something like that in there. So I'll be dropping that off. And I'm sure that many of you watching this video stream, you're also involved in collecting those signatures, and or you've signed them, or you're getting your friends and family to sign them, whatever you're doing. But the one thing to remember about this, that signature gathering effort, is that the deadline's going to come up really, really quickly. It's essentially the month of June to collect these signatures, and they have to submit them first week in July. So they're going to be really trying to consolidate as best they can all those signature sheets, certainly by the first couple days of July, so they can submit them just a few days later. And that makes it a little different than the effort last year, where they were initiatives to the legislature and they had all the way till the end of December. So it's easy to kind of get confused, but this is an initiative to the people, which means you have to turn in those signature sheets earlier. And so I'm doing my part as I drive around the state and gathering the sheets and consolidating them, and then just getting them to dropping them off as I'm driving around anyway to any official Let's Go Washington kind of drop-off location. But if you consolidate them, it just makes it a little bit easier for those guys, I think, to get the questions answered and kind of get them all put together. Then just a real quick update. If I saw you this past Saturday, at the Morton Pistol and Shotgun Range, that was part of the Lincoln Day dinner auction item that was given out at the Lewis County Lincoln Day dinner, and one of them was that to go shooting with me, and also with Sheriff Snaza from Lewis County, and also with Joe Kent, and it was basically a bowling pin indoor shooting competition. It was fun. I haven't done that before, actually. I've had other types of shooting events that I've done in the past, but I haven't done that type of event, and I was a little out of it anyway, so it was kind of fun to jump in. Just some great shooting by a lot of people that were there. It was fun, and it's been a while since I've done something like that, so I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting all the people that were there at the event. Loved the Morton Pistol and Shotgun Range. Turns out they do this type of competition every Wednesday night. So I encourage you, if you live anywhere near that area in Lewis County, it's roughly an hour from my house, but if you live anywhere near there and you're around there on Wednesday nights, it seems like a really fun opportunity for you to get involved, and it's really set up for indoor pistol shooting, and it's a lot of fun, and you'll meet some really good, capable, talented shooters who know what they're doing, but it's fun even if you're new to the whole process. You at least get a couple rounds while you get bounced out by the better shooters there, but still fun to observe. It's a great opportunity. Also, I do plan on kind of catching up. I did a couple videos today, and I probably next week I'll be catching up on just some of the PDC complaints, some of the people I've caught breaking the law around the state, either with ethics violations or with campaign finance violations, just to give you an update. It's kind of a continuous, ongoing thing that I've been doing for years, and so as the Public Disclosure Commission kind of resolves those cases, they tend to pile up, and I just kind of get to them in batches as they're caught and fined or officially sanctioned, whatever it is that the PDC is doing. So one of the emphasis that I wanted to get involved with here today, and I'm going to try to emphasize this if there's, although it looks like there's a lot of questions already popping up here, but was an emphasis on corruption and how to find it and how to look for it in government. And I referenced this in one of the videos that I produced today that I'll be launching a little bit later on, mainly about the auditor from Western Washington University who was fired for daring to expose the truth and not being willing to cover up and conceal the financial fraud that she had uncovered there at the university. And she prevailed in a jury verdict that went her way on every count in exposing it. She was basically it was unlawful termination for being a whistleblower and actually doing her job. Government usually doesn't like people to be internal auditors who are actually going to expose the truth, and so they fire them when they actually expose the truth. Not a surprise. That's what happened. However, I think that her tenacity and sticking to it and really doing a good job as a whistleblower and really crossing her T's and dotting her I's resulted in a favorable jury verdict of about $3 million, just under $3 million, that she was awarded and well-deserved for basically being unwilling to compromise and conceal the truth from the public or the federal government in a financial fraud scheme that was involving ghost classes and fake credits that the university was creating for students so that they could defraud the federal government on student loans. And it was a pretty interesting story because it's the second auditor in a row out of Western Washington University who's basically been terminated for or chased out for daring to expose the truth. Presumably the new auditors, internal auditors that work there, are more compliant and perhaps more willing to conceal the truth about financial improprieties or dishonesty or fraud that's happening right now at Western Washington University. This actually merits digging a lot deeper into that university, but that's a separate story. What it did lead to was, and what I hope to do with this live stream tonight, is to get into just some of the basics on how you too can get involved in exposing the truth about local government. And if you haven't filed a records request on local government, I don't care if it's your school district, your city council, your county commission, your port commission, any other local government, or even a state agency, number one, first rule, if you're going to get involved in government, you want to be an activist and you care about what's actually happening, look at the money. Always follow the money. If you are not following the money and trying to figure out where that money is going and how they're spending that money, then what I guarantee is that you're not going to be finding anything that's relevant or that's you're going to be less likely, let's say, to find anything that's relevant about the corruption or problems that might be going on there. And it's really a good way to get to know how an agency or a local government operates based on how they distribute their funds, how they prioritize funding, the subdivisions that exist there, where the money goes, who's getting the money. There's a lot to uncover there. You can look up grants. You can look up the original grant contracts. You can start to vet to see exactly how much money, for instance, in your local city that the homeless industrial complex is stealing from you, and basically making sure you have more drug addicts and more people on the streets dying of drug overdoses. You can look at contracts that the city or county or local government, could be a PUD or a school district, is kicking out, and exactly who the people are that own those businesses with those contracts, and how that money is potentially being recycled back into campaign contributions. You can look up things like the structure of the agency, who's in charge or who's in charge of what, how many employees actually work there, what their salary is, what their compensation structure is. You can look at things like their travel budget, which is, it just seems always to be a cornucopia of even if it's legal, it's ethically questionable activities. Credit card statements, which are universally, we find stuff all the time, is one of the ways that we caught a superintendent out in Moses Lake who was stealing money from the school district out there. Expense reports that are submitted, and including per diem sort of and receipts. Oftentimes there's a lot of stuff you'll find here. The calendars of senior bureaucrats or elected officials, and actually whether they correspond to what they're actually charging the city or the taxpayers for. There's a lot of stuff you can dig into, and following the money is a good place to start. So as I kind of outlined in the original thumbnail, just a brief description, getting into this video, any kind of corruption, usually the best thing to do is start with the money, get a multiple years worth of data so you can track trends and changes, and inevitably whatever you see is that's what's going to start to open the door to dig deeper, and it leads you to more interesting outcomes. The other thing to look at is, if I encourage people who are just getting started as well, go to the state auditor's website and pull up their audit reports that they've produced on fraud or findings that they might have had with local governments and state agencies. That's usually worthwhile. I do know the state auditor does its best to cover up and pretend like there's nothing to see there, but every now and then they accidentally uncover fraud, or they're forced into uncovering fraud, whether they want to or not. And so those stories are actually pretty worthwhile to look at. It also helps you establish some pattern of behavior on findings and other problems in the past. I will be doing a story about Thurston County and some of the significant problems there that led to the resignation of the county manager, the county attorney, and the county finance director, all of whom should have been fired long ago. But nevertheless, as a current state audit inevitably uncovered, there were a lot of problems with how the money was misused in Thurston County. And they're hardly alone. They aren't the only one out there. So that's just a basic overview there. I want to start jumping into these questions. I see a lot of people asking questions, and I'm going to have to keep up with them. The questions will pop up on the screen down below as I'm trying to answer them, and hopefully that will help you understand. If I've gone way off topic, you'll know that I have, and you'll know that I have when you actually look at it. So this is a question by Thunderstriker303. Evening, Glenn. It isn't a political question. Just want to ask, what fun plans do you have this summer, or do you not have any? That's a great question. This Monday, yesterday, I went on a hike up to Lower Lena Lake. If you're familiar with that, out in the Olympics, I was actually taking my nephew and an exchange student up on a hike up there. I've done a lot of hikes with my kids and with our local scout troop periodically, where we go up and explore a lot of places around Washington State. I've done a lot of that over the years myself. I did that when I was a kid, so it's kind of fun to be able to see it through their eyes and go on some of those hikes and adventures with them. So that was kind of fun. It was not a hard hike. It's about a 3-mile hike, give or take, up to the lake. And but it's always good. I mean, I think one of the things that people don't appreciate about the Pacific Northwest enough, particularly if they aren't going out and experiencing it for themselves, is just how much amazing hiking and opportunities that we actually have in the outdoors here. I've gone on hikes that my grandfather had gone on in the 20s and the 30s, and he'd point me in that direction. And it was, years ago, back when I was younger, and it was fun to be able to think, boy, I'm hiking on the same trail, or at least to the same lake that my grandfather hiked in when he drove his Model A, Ford out there with his brother in the 30s, and they parked it at their trailhead, which was probably further away and more difficult roads, and then being able to hike up to the same places that they did. That was fun. I used to do that in North Cascades area, or in some of the areas just outside off of I-90, for example, out of North Bend. So, and the Olympics, I've been doing a little more hiking more in the Olympic areas, or the Olympic Mountains and kind of on the peninsula, or some of the hikes down by Mount St. Helens, which is a little bit closer to where I live now. And so that's very fun to be able to do that. I anticipate probably doing a little bit more of that this summer as well. Otherwise, I spend a lot of time just cleaning up property, doing timber management work, and I've had a bear destroy one of my chicken coops recently, so I'm going to have to probably do some chicken coop repair work on the farm, and some fencing work that I probably also have to do. So there's always, if you've ever lived on a farm or you're familiar with anybody who does, there's always endless work that you're always doing on something like that. So let's see. Here's real quick. This is a self-promotion thing. Again, yes, Mickey Martin, thank you so much. Always hit the like and share button. We've got about, roughly in the last month, about another 1,100 subscribers have joined our channel, which I appreciate. Anything that kind of increases that subscriber count, and it doesn't cost you anything. You just hit subscribe on the YouTube channel down below. You can see it. It does, if you haven't subscribed already, it does help. It just increase the visibility a little bit of the channel over time. And so the more people that do that, just the more visible that the channel gets. So I always appreciate that. And I appreciate when people promote it and share it around for other people as well. So let's see. Getting back to this, I don't know why at We the Governed, you didn't spell it correctly, Glenn. Glenn Vanderwell. So that's why it didn't pop up here, but good try, and that's why I'm having this question here. I see that there are two very competitive Republicans running for governor. Does this mean that Republican votes will split and Democrats will win again? If so, how do we fix it? Good question. I don't think that and again, in the top two jungle primaries, we've discussed endlessly in a lot of the other videos I've done about the governor's race and other races as well. If you only have two Republican candidates that are running in that mix, usually they won't split themselves down so much that one of them doesn't get through. I would anticipate that one of the Republican candidates get through. So I'm a little bit less concerned about the governor's race not having at least an alternative to crazy corrupt town and on the Ferguson side of the equation. The question's probably going to be more on the Democrat side. There's a couple other people that have jumped in over there, and how do they divide things up? I don't tend to think that Mark Mullet is going to be able to prevail over Bob Ferguson on the Democrat side. If he did, that would be great, because you would have a Democrat, probably the last one left in the state Senate that believes math is real, actually in the final running instead of crazy corrupt guy, A.G. Ferguson. But again, I am doing a whole series on the corruption chronicles of Bob Ferguson and the Tales of Tyranny stories about Bob Ferguson, one of which I did record this week. So obviously I'm a little biased about that, but I don't think with just two Republicans. Now, if you had 5 or 3, as I've seen the Republicans do periodically in the past, where they're roughly close enough that they can self-immolate and take each other's votes, then you have a problem. There are a lot of problems with the top two primary system. It encourages gaming the flooding, it encourages gaming the system essentially, and you're seeing that in some of the way the races have been filed. One of the races I'd be fairly concerned about is the 5th congressional district. Just the sheer volume of Republicans that have filed there, and the likelihood that several of them are going to cancel each other out. I have no idea, and I can't tell what that's going to mean for that particular race. So that's where things are going. Here's a question. Are you going to be at a convention signing people's autographs? I don't think anybody really wants my autograph. So that's a funny question to me. I don't think of myself as a celebrity or somebody that matters enough that people would care about getting my autograph. But I will be going to events if events are coming up. And if it seems like there's a dearth of events, I might organize a couple myself, mainly for training purposes, getting activists more engaged in the political process, and looking at it more as a long-term process and not just an instant, overnight, election one and done kind of thing, but how to make change over time, which I believe you can only do with an engaged, active group of citizens, regardless of what's happening for the party or for a politician or for a specific election at any given time. If you want to make change, you're going to have to stay engaged on kind of a continuous basis at a level that makes sense and in a way that makes sense, and as part of a local team that you kind of help organize, because that's the only way over time that I've ever seen significant change occur in any environment. Your politicians aren't going to save you. Your political party's not going to save you. No special interest out there is going to necessarily save you. It's just kind of more of a ground-based process that is expansive and wide, and it doesn't move fast, but it does move over time in the right direction if you work on it. So, question from Jack here. Did I hear you say you live in the 4th district? You say Ford. I'm assuming you mean 3rd district. What chance do you give Joe Kent this time around? So it is a 3rd district that I live in. South Thurston County is where I live. And the 3rd congressional district is basically southwest Washington, going from the Oregon border all the way up to just a little ways north of my house. So I'm kind of in the very northern part of that district. And my belief is actually that Joe Kent looks pretty strong this particular cycle. The primary tells us a lot in August. And one of the things to remember is that the primary turnout numbers and votes matter significantly. It's hard because we have an August primary. A lot of people are on vacation, they're traveling. I'm probably looking at some colleges with my kids, right? You get distracted by that kind of stuff, or it is the trip to the beach, or just working on property projects, whatever it is that you're dealing with. And so it's easy to forget that August primary, and because of that, the turnout in the primary will be pathetic. It usually is. And so you can make an outsized impact in the primary by high voter turnout of your people, right? Your supporters, the people who agree with you. If you have a higher turnout, then you'll have a bigger impact, and it could shift the difference in which candidate actually makes it through the primary. So, but at this point in time, mainly just judging from the size of the support and the donations and the campaign funding, and just generally seeing him everywhere in the district, because I go to a lot of events. Joe Kent's usually there, and I just think that his campaign is pretty stronger this cycle than it was 2 years ago even. So my suspicion is that he's out there and working pretty hard. Tim Barnett got a question. How do we fix mail-in voting, fix Washington's department racism, fix better insurance pricing? Right now, insurance costs me $5 per mile. Wow. I've never measured insurance by the mile, so I'm not totally sure how you're measuring insurance by the mile. But just a real quick update for everybody in case you haven't been paying attention. If you are the 70% of Washingtonians, roughly, who actually get insurance for their cars, it's more disturbing that there's about a third of people out there that drive and don't have any insurance. I actually think it might be higher than that. But insurance, the insurance industry in their own publications say that 22% of the people on the road right now don't have insurance at all. Zero insurance, nothing. So if they get into an accident and it's not a hit and run where they run, even if you sit down and talk to them, they have no insurance anyway. And so your own policy is going to have to cover it, assuming you have underinsured or uninsured motorists. But one of the problems, of course, is that the automotive insurance rates have generally increased about 25% across the board for every single person in Washington State. It doesn't matter if you have a good driving record or not. And so because of the concern, it was something I was raising with my own insurance company. By increasing the price so much, it's a big financial impact. I mean, it's huge. For our family, I know it's very dramatic, it's difficult, and it's a very pricey sort of thing to deal with. And it shifts you just basically start cutting out other things in your life in order to cover the basics. And I would consider insurance a legally required basic. But a lot of people at some point are going to say, listen, what's the point? A third of the people around me driving don't have any insurance anyway.
I'm going to join the club because there doesn't seem to be any consequences for those people who don't have insurance. And I'll just roll the dice and take a chance. After all, I go to and I buy lottery tickets and I go to the casino. What's the difference? And unfortunately, I do think that's a big issue. And it's a big issue trending in the wrong direction. It is a bigger conversation about the overall problem with inflation and the significant costs of food, the significant costs, taxes having gone up, just everything. The escalating cost of living has gone up. And for very few people have they actually had an increase in equivalent pay, right? As far as their pay keeping up with the cost, that's just not happened for most people. Maybe if you work in the government, it has. Washington State Department racism. Not sure which racism you're talking about there. You might need to be more specific. If you're talking about the DEI type programs everywhere, that's obviously a huge issue. And racism has been baked in the cake for most state agencies and probably a good percentage of the local governments as well. It is a problem, and it's not a good thing. It's actually producing horrible consequences as a result. A biggest problem that has come out recently, of course, is on the medical school side of things, and people who are delusional and think moving to Idaho, for example, is going to save you. One of the things I remember running into a couple years ago was a teacher at the nursing school over in Idaho who literally lost her job, got fired because she made the scientifically accurate statement of saying there are boys and there are girl babies, right? Saying that there's two of them. And the school administration said that was an evil and terrible thing to say, and they fired her for it. And her kind of wokester students actually harassed her in Idaho, not Washington. That was in Idaho. She lost her job. And the result of that is that you're going to have a much lower quality of and science-denying weirdos that are coming out of these medical schools. The recent expose on the UCLA School of Medicine, I believe, where they said over half of the students there literally don't know anything about basic medicine. They're going to be completely incompetent when they hit the medical field, assuming that they give them the pass-on degree just for DEI reasons so they can hit some kind of imaginary pigmentation of skin coloration or checkbox that they're looking at instead of the quality of the student that's coming out and their ability to actually practice basic medicine. That's when the diversity, inclusion, equity world turns into DIE, and people will die and probably already are dying because of this push through of incompetence. You see a similar type of thing even with the Boeing problems with quality control. It's not exclusively because of their DEI kind of ESG sort of focus and obsession on political grandstanding and virtue signaling, but it is this failure to focus on quality control and best management practices when it comes to pretty much a long-established history of what it takes to build higher quality, very complex equipment. And as Boeing has trended away from that sort of focus and into a world that they're more focused on their virtue signaling kind of ESG image that they want to portray out there, that inevitably planes falling out of the sky, or certainly parts falling off the planes in the sky, become the inevitable result, and a lot of people will die and probably already have died because of that. And unfortunately, that's kind of the world that we're headed into right now, where you no longer focus on things that truly matter and you're obsessing and focusing on something that's more of a political, like I said, virtue signaling kind of scheme. Then you're very unlikely to get to the optimal outcome that you want. Mail-in voting right now is a much harder road. It's a difficult path to go down to fix, because essentially what you need is different elected officials in there, unless there's some kind of a change that comes from the federal other cases that are going through the court system in other states, and a general recognition by a lot of countries that mail-in voting is a fraud factory that's difficult to catch and stop. And right now, the general trend has been for auditors and even Secretary of States in not just Washington, but in places like Oregon, California, and Colorado, to actually make it almost impossible for anybody to do any kind of work. They demonize you, they attack you. If you're trying to clean up the voter rolls, they assault you, they threaten you, they want to punish you, imprison you, whatever the thing is. If you dare to actually question anything, they'll censor you for sure. The media will write up articles that are delusional and not based on reality just to falsify whatever story they're told to say. So places like the Seattle Times are functionally incapable of actually reporting the truth about anything related to voter rolls or mail-in voting or anything, because They've been told what story to say, and you're just not going to get through that way. So you have to grind away, and the system, flawed and incompetent and disastrous as it might be, in some way to basically push for that change over time and keep documented. It's more of a gradual change over time than anything instant or updated. Let's see. I don't know. Okay, that's not a question so much. Here we go. Where can I find the upcoming events on the website so I know when to come see you in person during the event on Saturday? Well, I would look up, because these aren't my events, they're events organized by other people. This is a Skagit County Lincoln Day Dinner, so it's going to be on their website. So I'm assuming you look up Skagit County Republicans and you look at their Lincoln Day Dinner for the 1st, and I will be there. And if you come there, tell me who you are and what your handle is so that I can see you and know that it was you making a lot of the comments. So anyway, I think that's important. This is just a good comment, not a question, but I'll post it up here anyway. I say all laws can be repealed, and that's absolutely true. No matter what law is passed, you can always repeal it. It isn't always that easy, so it sometimes takes a lot of work. Did you hear about the judge throwing out John Stockton's case against Sideshow Bob regarding 2 doctors who were charged with unprofessional conduct for COVID misinformation? No, I didn't. I kind of remember that case. There's a number of these cases. Actually, they're still in the court system as far as I know. So I don't know the results on that. I can't speak to any level of education or intelligence on it. If the judge threw it out, I'm disappointed because there's been several cases where it's very clear that Bob Ferguson egregiously overstepped any kind of normal boundaries that might exist with government and has used his office to vilify and attack and destroy people's lives simply because he can and wants to, not because there was any merit to his original claims or desire to do so. And COVID brought out the worst in government and the worst in a lot of our elected officials. So anyway, it's just, it is what's going on. Jason, question here. What's your thoughts on Biden addressing the nation on the Trump verdict, as if they can't make this even more obvious who's pulling the strings? Obviously, the whole thing is a political and absurd kind of witch hunt that's going on back in New York. And it looks like the case down in Georgia as well. And the documents case has even gotten more surreal and bizarre with the Mar-a-Lago raid and all the other drama associated around that. Biden obviously trying to make political hay out of this, as was intended with the original lawsuit that they filed against Trump in this case. You know, trumping up these kind of, which is funny. So trumping up fake, political persecution using the legal process probably is nothing new. Maybe the scope and spectrum of the attack is new, and we've not seen that in this country in the past. So they've really helped destroy any credibility that the rule of law, already, I think, being tattered by a lot of other problems, is suffering right now. And the belief system based on most people's observations that you have a multi-tiered judicial system where the rules are one level for people who are politically connected and tied into the right kind of cult sort of view of the world. And it doesn't always mean just Democrats, but certainly if they're the party elite, they get soft ball treatment, if any treatment at all, generally ignored. There's no crime they can commit that anybody's going to prosecute them on. They get away with everything, including any kind of violence, any kind of horrible, terrible behavior, corruption generally passes them by. Even when you have something like Menendez, the senator out of New Jersey, who got caught with all the cash and the money at home and what appears to be clear bribery there. When forced to go after a Democrat, sometimes they have to be that stupid and that egregious and that out in the open for them to actually go out there and do anything about it. So I just don't know. Biden, it seems foolish to me that he would be making those kind of announcements about that. And I saw that where they're planning ahead of time to have this announcement because they feel like they've got a corrupt judge and a corrupt jury that's already kind of sold their soul before they ever got started. I just think they're turning Trump into a martyr, and it doesn't seem to be producing the political result that they were hoping it would produce. And in this world where crime's gone up and inflation's going up and people are generally frustrated about government, I don't see that that's heading in the direction that
that it's going in. So Benjamin Barber, if my city is using $1 million of COVID money to build playground and gazebo, and the main contractor is a former Parks Department employee, how should I go about turning them in? Good question. I'll tell you one thing I would do initially is verify all those facts that you mentioned to me. So presuming that that's accurate, I would send that. That's a formal complaint you'd want to send to the feds. Actually, that's a large enough amount of money that usually it's the FBI that does those types of investigations when they're federal funding situations. So document it first and try to put together a pretty clean package and forward it. There's some links on the Department of Justice website, Federal Department of Justice, and I don't know if the FBI has that direct link to their site, but DOJ usually has it. And send in an official complaint against them. And then, frankly, document it really well and just write it up so that it's very open and public about what's going on. And you don't really know where it's going to go, but also you can send me some of that information and I'll pass it up. I mean, it doesn't hurt if there's multiple complaints out there, and that'll help you get it in the right direction. Cracking up, yeah. Don't call the AG's office. Yeah, Bob Ferguson will cover up every bit of fraud he can. I don't know if right now that he's running for office, he may suddenly rediscover some fraud. Maybe he can find some Republicans that committed fraud. But I just don't see. The AG's office is not known for covering up any type of fraud. Let's see. There's a question from Levi here. Levi, I'm assuming I got fired from the state for not getting vaccinated. There's a lawsuit pending right now that I'm not involved in. Depending on how that turns out, do you have any advice in the direction I should go? If you have the opportunity to join a class action case that it matches the fact pattern that you experienced, I would definitely encourage you to join it. It doesn't hurt you at all, I think, to go down that road. That's probably the best thing to do. I would double check. I would follow these cases and then see what happens. Somebody has to be the first case that goes through, and then that tends to trigger a whole series of these cases. Particularly with a lot of the stories that have come out now about the misinformation and false information that was put out by our state health officials, just like it was done at the federal level. And I think they do it under the theory that if we're all wrong, nobody can be held accountable. So if we're all dishonest and we're all corrupt and we're all giving bad information, then none of us can be held accountable because we were all corrupt. So we can do this and point figures at each other. But with the mask mandates coming out and the social distancing things coming out, it's just fake. No science behind it at all, just fake policy that was invented for no reason. The clear side effects that they tried to cover up with some of the vax programs that are now coming out and being made public, with the clear and obvious fact that it looks like this was indeed a lab release, whether it's accidental or on purpose, project that they basically needed to use to cover up a bigger issue that's a lot bigger than our state, but more of a bigger issue for national issue over there in Wuhan, and essentially covering up some of the American involvement in that original gain of function research that was done. It just seems like this is going to become a story that just keeps getting worse. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, and but do pay attention to those cases because that opportunity may still exist for you, and you should be aware of it. And I appreciate that. Please try to use the let's see over here, We the Govern, just so I can see your question here. How do financial institutions comply with regulations to ensure transparency in money transactions? Well, really, it depends. The funny thing is there's actually different rules for different types of financial institutions. So there are different rules actually for different size banks. But generally, there's money laundering, there's criminal racketeering rules that they have, there's tax reasons that they also comply, and they generally report anything the feds ask for. So if people think you're cheating on your taxes, they're going to look at your bank statements, and your institution's going to give it to them any of the information that they need. The only overreach I've seen recently that seems to have been pushed back on that was that case, I think, out of California, where it was actually like
what is it, where the people store valuables in their lockers, and they being the feds at the time, decided to get involved and stole a bunch of people's money because there were a couple bad actors in that place. But I believe it was a financial institution, but they had safe deposit boxes is what it was. And so they decided that even a couple of them, instead of just getting a couple of them, they stole the money from everybody. And that case, the feds lost recently. It was kind of a big deal. So anyway, that's just how things go. But essentially, they basically track most of the there's a lot of regulations they have, EIN numbers and all this other stuff to just track who has the bank accounts and the information in the first place. But they're constant. It's very automated right now, and the feds, I think, can look at pretty much anything they want and when they want to. Local government's a little different, like Public Disclosure Commission or the Attorney General's office or something, but generally they can get a subpoena and they get this stuff, and nobody really stops them from doing that. Following that, another follow-up question here: can you explain the role of forensic accounts in tracing financial transactions? My experience with forensic accounts is mostly when I'm trying to look for fraud or missing funds or a misuse of funds or money laundering kind of operations that occur in the government space. That's actually been more of my experience with forensic accounting. And it's a fancy term for just being able to follow the money and figure out what's actually happening and to be able to see what things match and what things don't and whether the money's disappeared somewhere. If you're an activist and you're trying to find fraud, or you're trying to verify if it is fraud, or when you're trying to figure out what's going on, I think a forensic accountant is pretty helpful. But all that really means is it's just somebody who understands how to look at the financial transactions at whatever level that they can get to and identify red flags. It's not actually always a guarantee just because somebody says they're a forensic accountant and they think they found something. It's not a guarantee that they did. It's just that it lets you kind of eliminate a lot of potential dead ends that you'd go down, and you can focus on where it looks like the big red flags really are. I'll give you an example of this that I've been peripherally involved in the past. Had to do with Columbia River Crossing financial contracts related to big projects that had to do with, like, the 520 bridge up in Seattle, which was a big grifting operation, the Columbia River Crossing, where they spent massive amounts of money without even building anything. And there was some common contractors that were being used in these places that had a high level of rotation of Department of Transportation employees that kind of went through their leadership. They would be working for the company for a few years, and they would rotate back to DOT, and then they would come back into the company, and they would go it was kind of like this round robin sort of operation. And these were the big companies that tended to get all the contracts. And one of the things that we were looking at was double billing or triple billing or even quadruple billing, who knows, on overhead allocation for some of the types of contracts. The state allows and the feds allow a certain amount of overhead billing from, like, a central office for the projects that are being worked on. And these companies usually go right up to the allowed threshold, sometimes even beyond if they think they can argue why that's justified. And a lot of times that's just fluff money that they're getting for profit. And so they want it, but typically, like when the state auditor audits it, they only go down one contract. They don't do, like, all contracts with the same company and then cross-reference it to see if the billing is being duplicated. So in other words, that same 2 or 3 employees in this one office remote out in Spokane, is that overhead cost assigned to them in 3 or 4 different contracts? Nobody knows, because before we could get that far, the forensic accountant said that her life was threatened, and then the company decided to sue Department of Transportation. It was like a friendly lawsuit, and no longer could you get any records because they were in the middle of litigation and they weren't going to share any. And so we never did find out what really happened there. And my guess is it was probably not good, and a lot of your taxpayer dollars are wasted in that kind of fraudulent operation. Forensic accountants, though, can be pretty helpful in that road. How do we stop the mail-in ballot fraud? Best place to stop it is at the voter registration process, looking through the voter rolls and trying to clean them up. It is not going to be perfect. There's no way. So, but it would be, you can reduce, I think, how much is actually going on out there by paying close attention. Not every auditor in Washington State's corrupt. Not every one of them. There's a disturbing number of them that seem to be willing to look the other way, but I don't believe they're all corrupt. And so the people who work in their offices are not all corrupt. There's good people who work in most of these offices. Doesn't mean all of them, and some offices are more troubling than others, but your ability to work well with them and efficiently in analyzing the voter rolls is one of the projects that I've been working on, and actually one I think I'm going to expand a little bit more on, because I do see that by working with it over time, we're making some impact in cleaning up some of the voter rolls. The other thing you have to do out there is look for the fraudulent vote ballot purchasing projects. Ballots are going for about $30 a ballot, especially for people who are not U.S. citizens. They thought they could sell their ballots for $30, and somebody else was probably voting them for them, and that's illegal. It's still illegal even in our state, and documenting that is a big part of the equation. So people that are going to go out and buy these ballots, we want to catch them and document who they are, how much they're paying, and which ballots they're purchasing, so that we can track the fraud. That is a type of fraud. It does go on. It's very difficult to track down. It becomes challenging. So pay attention to where you live. When you find these stories, run them down. You'll have a lot of fake stories that come up that aren't real, but when you find something real, get in touch with me if you believe that you have that kind of information. Let's see. I'm trying to get down here. Yeah, okay, great. Let's see. Glenn Vanderbilt. Yes, where you have dogs where I live, the dogs become cougar bait, and they get eaten up pretty quick. So unless you have a bunch of them, a bunch of big ones, and even then, now that they don't do hound hunting anymore, the fear of the dogs from bigger animals that can kill them very easily is a little bit less dramatic. So you're going to have less protection for that. Not a Washington question, but what's your thoughts on Portland voting out the crazy DA? I think that's great. And listen, we had a similar thing happen in Seattle. We had a prosecutor, or it's actually the city attorney, and Ann Davidson she was not the bad one. The one she was running against was insane. And Seattle has seen this upsurge in crime, and getting her into office, you can't prove it negative in the sense what would have happened if she was not there, but I guarantee the crazy town person that she was run against would have been horrible for the city of Seattle. And the fact that they elected somebody who was sane, who actually believed in the rule of law, who's actually willing to enforce some of the rules, I believe that that's actually trended, has helped reduce crime from where it would have been otherwise without her in office. So I think that's a big deal. And watching Portland go through this same process, it's a good thing for them and a good thing for everybody when sane people get put into office and the crazies get removed. It doesn't happen fast enough, and it's not happening often enough, but we need to have it happen more. Let's see, here's a question here. Niall Adamson, regarding the Supreme Court's decision, this is a federal Supreme Court decision, on the Second Amendment that felons can possess a firearm, certain types of felons, do they still need to petition the Supreme Court of Washington State and file a motion? That is a good question. I don't know. Washington State gun law, this is one of those questions I would probably ask them, because I think that the guys that run that are really, really good, and they're very specific and knowledgeable about the statute. And I saw this, and I kind of wondered the same thing. So I don't know. I think the state might now still argue that you have to petition them, but it's possible that with that federal decision, they may decide, you don't have to. And then that's going to change the firearm ownership rules in an unusual way here. I don't know that I like this idea about saying that particularly violent felons, which I'm not sure that's what the ruling was in this case. I don't know that it dealt with like particularly egregious violent felons, but you want to have a path where somebody who's committed a crime actually has some consequences to it. Doesn't mean that when they've served their time in prison or jail, or they've done their time and try to become a productive member of society afterwards, that they can't go through the process again to get the right to vote, to get the right to own firearms, whatever it is that they're working on to become a U.S. citizen. I think you are a full functioning citizen. I think you want to provide that as an option for people who have truly turned their life around, but you want to make sure that that's who's getting it. You don't want it to just be a meaningless event that you might serve some prison time for, and not enough in most cases for violent crime now, and then and then just it getting worse and worse. So let's see. Oh, good. Thank you for making. This isn't a question, but you said at We the Govern. So, Jane Cassidy, thank you for signing I-2066. You're not alone. A lot of people have. Is Janice Lohan, question here, is anyone trying to correct the squatting laws in the state? My husband won't build because of squatting laws. Thank you. Well, to some extent, I think there's been a general backlash against some of the squatting problems that you've seen. Washington's had some problems. It hasn't been as bad in Washington as it's been in other states. There's a variety of rules that could be changed more to make it a little bit easier. One of the things I'll point out is that with the recent change to some of the laws, there's a ton of evictions going on right now, official evictions. They've lifted some of the COVID restrictions on the evictions, which inevitably everybody knew was going to produce this unusual surge of evictions. And it's done that now that those rules have technically lifted. And so you're going to have a lot more evictions going on, which essentially is addressing similar types of issues. But, one thing about this is making sure that you pay attention to your properties where you aren't in continuous residence. It used to be one of the things we would do is, if you're going away on vacation, you would have a friend stay at your property. If you live in a farm type environment like I do, you kind of have to do something like that because you need somebody to watch the animals or you need somebody to do keep up on basic stuff. So it's somebody you trust, family member usually, or a real close friend that comes in and they're willing to keep an eye on things and shoot predators or, open and close your animals or just do some basic stuff, while they're there. So that was more common in the past. I know I did that when we first bought had our house put on the property where I live now, and we weren't living there yet. And I had multiple friends of mine move in and stay there, sometimes at minimal cost. One of them was like a helicopter trainer for Glacier Aviation up at Olympia Airport, which wasn't too far from our house. And so he had the benefit, he could just stay there, but he could also fly the helicopters over and land them in our front yard on the hill. And that was one of his ways of just keeping an eye on the property, is he'd fly a helicopter around periodically while he's training people how to land. And we gave him permission to do that, of course, and that was kind of fun. So anyway, there's different things you can do to keep an eye on your place. But again, if you, it's very difficult to see what for sure. I don't see anything that's being dramatically done, but it feels like they've made some changes to address the squatting. Or is it interactive? I'm assuming that this question is having to do the Second Amendment question. And Niall, this is tied into the first one. I'm not sure what the answer is on that one. Alex Brown 1, do you think any repercussions will come for Ferguson's illicit actions against the other Bob Fergusons? Maybe. And I'll tell you this because the significant violation, threatening to imprison people, is just part and parcel, I think, of being a Democrat today in Washington, or being somebody with political power, I think. However, one of the things that did come out of that was Bob Ferguson threatening the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, or basically bullying him into breaking the law in a way that was personally benefiting him, like Bob Ferguson himself, the AG Bob Ferguson. And so that level of dishonesty and criminal activity, because that is actually a crime that was committed by Bob Ferguson, leads us down different legal paths. And I'm not sure where that's going yet, but it seems to be a snowballing conversation that's happening right now. Cracking up, this is a great question. Can we establish a squatter's registration so they can be locked up? I'm assuming locked up and removed, or looked up and removed. Okay, it's kind of like the sex offender registry. The answer is yes, you can do that. That would take a legal change, and probably not a bad one. So that's where it goes. So on this question here, quick question, speaking of the Saturday in-person event, what time does the event start and where does it take place? Well, I'm not looking at their website right now. I think I'm trying to get up there around 5 o'clock or 4:30, something like that. So it's got to be sometime in that area. And it's going to be up, I know, at the airport there in Skagit. But you're spending more time asking me the question than if you actually just log into their website and look for sure, so you get the exact correct time that start and the exact hangar that they're at there. But that's where it is. So if you're anywhere near Skagit County, that's where I would go if you want to see me and talk to me in person. That's the next event that I know for sure I'm going to be at. Yeah, you're not alone. I'm sorry your premium went up. Mine didn't go up 45%, but it certainly went up a lot, and it was pretty ridiculous. Will there be any chance during the governor debates that there will be questions asked of Sideshow Bob as to his abuse of power and his deliberate waste of taxpayer money? The answer to that is easy. Number one, I'm actually not even sure they'll do a governor's debate. My sense is that they probably won't, or if they do, they tend to control it and restrict it so much that there won't be much substantive sort of conversation going on. And no, Bob won't get any hard questions at all. And if he does, they'll be prepared. They'll probably give him the questions in advance, which they wouldn't do the Republican, just so that he's more prepared. I mean, listen, these debates are not honest in many cases. I've been involved in debates, and it's hard. What happens is to run a real fair debate, you really are, oftentimes they're less about debates than they are just simply presenting the two side by side, and you get to see them in a forum. What I find is that the media is not terribly honest anymore about these debates, and they oftentimes will leak information to one side, not the other. You see this at the presidential side. Trust me, it happens locally as well. The bias of the moderators is important because I think it affects things. If you're going to be a moderator, you want to be as fair and even-handed as possible. I've been a moderator in these debates before. It's not super easy. So there's a lot of work about that. So anyway. Let's see. Without meritocracy, Alpha Charlie Tango, without meritocracy, won't our society enter a death spiral? Well, I'm strongly of the belief that meritocracy is an important part of a healthy and functioning society that's going to expand and grow and be in better society tomorrow than it is today. If you begin to lose that, it doesn't instantly destroy itself, but it certainly moves in the wrong direction. So I'm a big fan of meritocracy because it allows people who come from difficult circumstances to rise above the circumstances of their birth and to attain a significant benefit for themselves and their heirs in the future if they're willing to do the work or demonstrate some kind of skill set that's going to move them in that direction. I think that's important. And the fact that we've lost some of this is it's a problem. So anyway, so that's one of the issues that we have here. So I would just make sure that you're aware of the importance of meritocracy, the rule of law, and a lot of other things that we seem to have been slipping on a lot lately. Sorry, you're in Arizona. That's a lot harder to find me if you're down there. I'm in Washington State, so it's a little difficult to come all the way up here. And that's a long ways to go for one event. But if you want me to come down to Arizona and do a presentation to a local group of activists down there, and you're willing to cover some of the costs for me to do so, I'll do that. I've done that with a number of other states and activist groups around, mainly on the west side of the United States, but I've helped out when people do something like that. So, Jason, here's a question. What's your thoughts on the new bridge they want to build in 2026 from Vancouver to Portland? Will it actually be built or will it be boggled down with red tape? The problem, the problem with the bridges between Oregon and Washington is the general approach has been to design failure and corruption into the whole process from the very beginning. It's not that we don't probably need some more bridges over the Columbia. I believe that we do. The problem is that the way they want to do it is tied into scams like the light rail scam, which is extra costly, and it's not about reducing congestion. It's generally about creating whatever kind of construction boondoggle they can so that everybody gets their cut of the pie. Unusual purchases of land along future proposed right-of-ways, for example, transit-oriented development scams that tend to pop up, kickback schemes with certain contractors that also conveniently result in campaign contributions. All this kind of stuff is going on right now, and it's ridiculous. And also, they typically will build an undersized bridge. They don't build one that's built for growth. And that's another one of the issues. And then, of course, the other thing is to look at what's past the bridge. You've got the Rose Quarter bottleneck, I believe, on the Portland side, because you're really talking about Portland and Vancouver being connected here. And it just isn't clear that makes any sense in doing just the bridge without some kind of a plan for how you're going to resolve the traffic over the bridge. It's absurd, and if they weren't so corrupt and incompetent and mostly corrupt, this could be done. You can hire real engineers. You don't have to pay off people. You don't have to get so corrupt in this whole process, but unfortunately, it's the way that it's going right now. How was Inslee able to grant McKinney Corporation no bid deals during the Corona? I don't know a lot of the details about that particular thing, but Inslee was able to do all kinds of weird things during the Corona scam. And remember, this was just a bonanza fraud all over the place that they were able to use with a lot of insider deals, kicking cash out everywhere with fraud all over the place. It's a problem. So anyway, I'd be paying more attention to that. How is just he just did it, figuring nobody would actually look at it. I don't know why this question is particularly relevant, but it looks like it's between two people. So, but the nightmare of the problems here is real with these construction. And so, anyway, let's see. Remember, I was asking you a question about the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. So that's the one out in Delaware. Collapsed on a cargo ship, or Maryland out there. Days ago, crews set off a chain of explosives to take down part of the bridge. Yeah, because they're having to, the whole bridge, what happens is once it structurally is down, right, you're going to have to find the most efficient way you can to chop it up and get it out of the way, essentially, before they rebuild it. It's not a good thing. That's a problem. Big hunk of man, are they still protesting Israel at the university? Yeah, pretty much. I think UW is. They might have, taken down some of the tents, and some of the people decided to graduate since there were no consequences for doing crazy things. But I think the anti-Israel protests are going to continue certainly all the way through the election because that seems to be their current plan. Maybe they'll find some other. Way of. Expanding into something new. They'll create a new cause to protest. That's usually what it is. There's a couple questions up above I realized I just missed. Let's see. Yeah, I was there. Tim Vandermeer. This is a great question here. What action can we take after the WIAA awarded a boy a first place state medal in the 2A 400? And I was standing right there on the side of the track where that happened. My son was running in the 3200 at the time, or at that same event. And so this was, there were protesters there. I'm glad they were there. They were actually highlighting the fact that you had a mediocre boy runner who wasn't going to go anywhere in the 400, who decided to switch and claim that he was a girl, and quickly, with minimal, just say he's a girl, change his name, and next thing you know, they were letting him run in the 400, and he stole a first place position from a girl who'd been working her entire life to win state and was given second place. And I was there. And I noticed that nobody cheered for him when he was on that stage, because nobody likes a cheater, and that's cheating, and that's stealing awards from the girls that actually deserve it. I have girls in sports myself, and who have participated in sports their whole life. And although they haven't been in a situation where their position was stolen by a boy yet, they could have been, they could be, and that's devastating and heartbreaking to them to lose this. And I was there, and I watched it happen to these other girls, and it's ridiculous. So the WIAA should be contacted directly, but frankly, women are the best people to talk to them because all these people are focused on identity politics. They've lost most of their attachment to reality. So you're going to have to approach them as women and as some people who care about Title IX protections for women in sports, who are willing to actually go up there and confront them and talk to them and say, listen, this is ridiculous, right? You need to have boys and girls, they still need to be separate in sports. That was the whole point. The whole point. I can't think of anything that's going to destroy and harm women more than basically letting men beat up on them and take away all of their recognition. That's just bizarre in sports, where that was a whole reason for why they were putting that up in the first place. So anyway, have you thought about switching your streams to Rumble? Not entirely. I've had a backup plan with Rumble on my YouTube channel generally. And my plan is, especially as Rumble kind of gets more mature in their network, just the system gets set up a little bit better. Mostly it's to back up everything I have so that if they ever take away the YouTube channel, I'll still have the Rumble channel. However, and so anyway, that's just one of those things I'm going to try to do. But eventually, I'm assuming that I'll be able to do simultaneous streams on both channels. Haven't tried that yet, but that's one of the things I've been thinking about trying to do. Let's see. Patreon don't know what you're asking there, but I don't have a Patreon account myself. So if you want to donate to me, you can go to my website at wethegovern.com, and there's a direct link. You can send donations that way. I usually link that down in the YouTube videos section as well as on the website, We the Governed. And I wanted to just point this one out. It's a comment, not a question, but they do spend money on everything except the bridge, and that is the problem. It's mostly wasted on scams and kickbacks and corruption. So let's see. Yep, I know. I have this design in the background for a state capitol. And when the guy made it, he actually based it on the D.C. Capitol instead of the Washington State Capitol look. So it is more of a D.C. Capitol, not a Washington State look. But that was a good eye for catching that. Let's see. 40 acres of fencing. Wait a second. I don't know what school is it? Sorry. Okay, what school is this? It wasn't a school. This happened at the Washington State track meet. So it's where all the schools, 2A, 3A, and 4A were competing. And I believe that in this case, the 400 was the 2A girl who had the state title stolen from her. More significantly, too, than just her, because she's still recognized. At least she's on the podium in second place. But they only have... you only get recognized in being in the top 8 finishers of the state meet. And the girl who was number 9 got no recognition at all. She got bounced out. So women are going to have to push back on that. 40 acres of fencing. Was it wire? Well, frankly, if a bear coming through is going to come through any normal fencing, if there's chain link fencing, it's a little bit harder for them to come through. But I've had bears climb chain link too, so even that type of fencing, they can go up. So, let's see. You passed over 2 of my posts. I didn't even see any of your other posts. Let me look up here, see if there was something up here I missed. And I am not seeing any of your other posts. So, Daniel, I don't know which post you're talking about because I don't see him here in the channel. Yeah, I don't have any plans right now to come to Arizona, but if anybody wanted to organize an event and have me come down there, you can always do that. I do sometimes travel out of state to do events in other places. So with that, I just want to say I think we're if I miss any questions, Daniel, you mentioned I missed a question. I don't see any questions that you've asked. So today was not as heavy a traffic day as we've had the last couple times, but I still want to thank everybody for logging in. It's just coming after a Memorial Day weekend. The day after Memorial Day, that's usually hardly a day where people are going to have their minds still wrapped around the politics and the political process. And so when that happens, it's very... impressive that anybody's actually trying to be engaged and be involved in the political process like this. Now I got a couple questions that just popped up. I'll try to answer these, and these will be the last ones that I answer. Daniel, they had web links, and then perhaps that's why. Yeah, I don't think web links will come through when you're asking questions on a live stream. So that might be something that YouTube just automatically doesn't put through because of spam purposes, spam reasons. So if you have questions, make sure you send them without links. And Nate's memes, is there any way to take legal action against the state for lack of representation besides Democrats? Not typically. You can't just sue the state saying I don't have enough people who represent me politically. That's not what you're going to be able to do. You can do that if you say it won't represent you racially in some way. You can make a racist thing out of it, but and that's happened before. But you really can't do it for political reasons. So anyway, with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining me for today's live stream. Like I said, the day after the Memorial Day, it's not easy. Again, pay attention to what's going on out there. There's plenty of corruption to find if you want to be engaged in that process. And again, if you are engaged in this, even if you've already signed I-2066, make sure that you engage and get everybody you know to sign. I think that this is a very popular initiative. I get the sense, just from what I'm hearing, that a lot of people are going to be heavily involved in getting this thing across the finish line.
But never presume that somebody else is going to do it for you. Grab some of those sheets, go out there, get them signed by your friends and coworkers and neighbors and everybody else, and get them turned in. The more the better. And again, when they go to turn them in, they're going to need probably about 405,000 signatures. 325,000 is the legal amount that they're looking for, but they probably need closer to about 405,000 just to be safe. So I hope that helps. You know what you can work on this week if you don't have anything else to work on. And otherwise, adopt a local politician who you think is good and help them get across that finish line in August first. First, the primary in August, and then, of course, in November, again, I'm elected. So anyway, that's it for now. And thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll see you. Remember, next week it's going to be on a Monday night. And hope all's going well. And look forward to a couple of my videos that I have coming up here. And we'll see you next time.